Embark on a captivating journey through the intrigues and disappointments of love. This is a story of how one person faces betrayal and divorce, but finds the strength to start anew. Complex decisions, unexpected twists, and genuine emotions await you in this gripping tale. Rose, my wife of a decade, greeted me as I walked through the door after work on Wednesday night. She asked me to sit at the table because we needed to talk about something serious. I thought to myself, wow, this sounds like the star of many difficult conversations. As I took my seat, she began by stating that she was confident that I knew she loved me and would never harm her marriage. Her words made me feel uneasy. I replied, "Okay," but before I could finish, she interrupted and took a deep breath. I knew this conversation was about to take a bad turn. She continued, "I love you and want us to grow old together, but I have made a decision. I want to have an affair." This revelation completely caught me off guard, and it didn't sit well with me. I attempted to clarify, so let's get this straight. You love me, you do not want to harm a relationship, but you do want to be close to someone else? She responded, "I wouldn't put it quite like that. I've met someone I'd like to have a physical relationship with. It would only happen on occasion, and I promise to always be open and honest with you. I believe I love you enough that this will not affect my feelings for you. If you truly love me as you claim, you should let me do this because I feel compelled to." She smiled confidently as she explained. I responded, confused and surprised. "I don't understand why you believe you have to do this, and I can't understand how it wouldn't affect us. Have you made plans with this person yet?" Rose nodded, or tentatively planning to go away for the weekend next week. She asked me a question and urged me to be honest. She wanted to know how I would react if she proposed the same thing to me. I knew that a truthful response would make her explode because the idea was so surprising. I replied, "I would be fine with it as long as you assured me that it would not harm our relationship." She stated, "You know damn well you would have flipped out if I had brought up such a thing." I scoffed at her comment, and she looked surprised, responding, "I honestly did not expect you to react like this. I thought your love for me would allow me to do something so important." I retorted, "Well, whatever you've been smoking, it must be illegal. Did you really think it just gave you permission to be with this guy? So I'm supposed to sit at home and do nothing while you go off of the weekend?" "Maybe I didn't think things through properly," she admitted. "You're correct. I did consider many factors, including my own feelings. If I say no, will you still go ahead with it?" "I honestly do not know. I never expected you to refuse me. We didn't think this through very well. This is what we will do. Give me a few days to think about this. Let's sit down Sunday afternoon and we'll talk about it after I've had some time to reflect." Tonight took me by surprise. Feeling uneasy, I went into our bedroom and started relocating my belongings to the guest room. She inquired about what I was doing. I explained that I preferred not to share a bed with her because she appeared to be more interested in someone else than me. I closed the door firmly after entering the guest room. The night was not particularly restful, but I did make a plan. It occurred to me that if she carried out her intentions, our relationship would be irreparably damaged. The next day I left for work as usual, but I didn't speak with Rose. I called my office and explained that I needed the next 2 days for personal reasons. Then I set to work on my strategy. I bought 3 voice-activated recorders and placed one near the phone, one in our bedroom, and one in our car. I even found a phone tape recorder that connected to our landline. My next destination was the cell phone provider. Since my name was on our phone plan, I was able to obtain a copy of her phone charges. Later, while she was still at work, I decided to look into her email accounts. I discovered one I hadn't known about, but the password was simple. What I discovered there was quite revealing, but at least I learned she hadn't been physically involved with him yet. To wrap up my day, I set up the account to forward any emails to me without leaving any trace. I got my hands on a set of discreet GPS locators. These small gadgets were easy to conceal. I intended to slip one into her wallet where she would most likely keep her cash and credit cards, and the other into her car. It had been a hectic day, but I had everything set up to keep track of her. The only thing missing was access to her cell phone to check for messages. I hope to do that later this evening. Along with planning the GPS devices, I checked her emails and discovered that she had exchanged several messages with a coworker named Frank Jones. Frank was in the middle of it all, and I was ready to turn his world upside down, just as he had done to mine. The emails confirmed that the upcoming weekend was a go, regardless of what I said. That Friday, I went to see a divorce lawyer who came highly recommended. I told him to begin the divorce proceedings with adultery as the cause, naming Frank Jones as the man. I planned to sue. The lawyer assured me that the case would be straightforward with proper evidence. I showed him all of the emails and phone records and mentioned that I would soon have audio tapes as well. He appeared pleased and determined to begin the proceedings immediately. When Rose returned home that evening, I ignored her and remained silent as she prepared dinner. I left the house and went to a bar to eat and drink a few beers. When I returned, she attempted to speak to me, but I simply walked past her, entered the guest room, and slammed the door shut. Her only chance to save our marriage was to cancel her plans with Frank, but I wasn't optimistic about it happening. I continued to ignore her all weekend until Sunday afternoon when I decided it was time to talk. We both took seats in the kitchen, and I began by expressing my dissatisfaction with her request. I explained that I had given it a lot of thought and couldn't come to terms with it. I pointed out that despite her claims that it would have no effect on her marriage, it was already causing problems. I noticed her upset demeanor and suggested that if she had looked at things from my perspective, she might have been more understanding. I mentioned my attempts to see from her perspective, but I didn't see any positive results. As a result, I had to decline her request. How can you be so selfish when you love me? If anyone here is selfish, it appears to be you wanting to be with someone else. What happens if I go ahead with it anyway? There will be serious consequences for any extramarital relations. 10 years ago, we both made vows to be faithful. I understand, but this is something I need to do. Well, I suppose this discussion is over, I said, getting up and leaving the house, taking my laptop to a Wi-Fi hotspot to monitor their emails. She was furious and assured him that she would leave regardless. He told her it was great because he had already reserved room 125 at the Hilton in Kansas City for Friday and Saturday nights. I immediately reserved the room for Thursday night. They were making it too easy. They also had a romantic date planned for Saturday evening, which included dinner at Johnson & Wells. Rose mentioned that she bought new underwear specifically for their date. I grabbed a bite to eat and kept an eye on their correspondence. They had moved past my refusal and were deep into planning their weekend. The check-in time was 3 o'clock, so he planned to pick her up at 1 o'clock. They wanted to arrive as soon as possible, given the 2-hour drive. I was surprised he was going to pick her up at home. I needed to decide what I wanted to do about that. I also reserved a weekend room close enough to theirs to intercept all of their signals for the next few days. I gathered all of the required equipment, including a couple of small fiber-optic HD video cameras. I intended to install them in the room on Thursday to be fully prepared to document their weekend adventures. This evidence would be ideal for my divorce proceedings. I ignored her for the entire time, but Wednesday was her day of reckoning. I decided to give her one final chance. If she chose Frank, that would mean the end for us. I invited her to join me at the table for a moment. She did not seem thrilled, but she complied. I started the conversation by asking if she had given it much thought. She confirmed that she had and expressed her intention to carry out her plan. She mentioned her upcoming trip with Frank and hoped that we could get past this. I let out a sigh and warned her that this was her final chance to reconsider. I advised her not to jeopardize our marriage for someone else and warned her about the consequences if she did. Despite my warning, she stood firm on her decision. I concluded by saying she had chosen Frank over me. I then left the room, closing the door firmly, as I usually did, indicating the finality of her decision. It was clear that our marriage had ended, and someone would have to face the consequences. Thursday morning, I went to work and asked for the afternoon and the following day off to finalize my divorce plans with Rose. My boss was sympathetic and offered his support, giving me the time I required. On Thursday, I drove to Kansas City, checked into their room, and set up all of the surveillance devices to ensure they were working properly. I wanted to gather all of the evidence needed for the divorce proceedings and then deal with that on my laptop. I confirmed that all of the cameras were operational and aimed correctly. I waited for them to turn off before moving around to ensure they would activate. Everything seemed fine. I walked down the hall past their room to ensure I had enough French for monitoring. Once again, it was within reach. When I returned home, I considered ending my marriage. I had one more errand to complete. I went to a gun store and purchased a small can of pepper spray to disrupt their romantic date. When I arrived home, Rose was waiting in the kitchen, looking expectantly at me. I walked past her without speaking and slammed my door once more. Rose came into my room attempting to be friendly, but I told her to save it for Frank because I didn't need any sympathy. I turned away from her, and she left. I slept restlessly that night, but everything was set to end on Friday morning. I got up and left at the usual time without saying anything to her. I visited the lawyer's office and signed divorce papers. I informed them that I would have all of the required evidence by Monday and asked that she be served with the papers at her workplace on Monday afternoon. I also requested that they serve papers on Frank at the same time as I intended to sue him for alienation of affection. Rose's GPS indicated she was at the hair salon. I entered the house and opened her suitcase where I discovered her new underwear. They were undeniably attractive, however. It was unfortunate she wasn't doing this for me. Wearing rubber gloves, I took out her new laundry and sprayed pepper spray on the crotch of her panties and the cups of her bra before returning them to the suitcase. It was going to be interesting. I went to the bank and closed all of our joint accounts, transferring all of the funds to a new account. I also canceled the credit cards in both of our names. With a successful morning's work behind me, around 12:30, I headed home to say goodbye to my wife. I knew she was preparing for a new man. I entered the house. Rose was nowhere to be seen, so I assumed she was upstairs getting ready. I went up to her room and walked in, finding her wearing some underwear I had previously gifted her. She attempted to cover herself, but I told her not to be silly because I had seen it all before. She looked stunning with her new hairstyle, flawless makeup, and alluring lingerie. I couldn't resist telling her how beautiful she looked that day. I expressed my disappointment that she did not make such an effort for me. She responded by explaining that she simply wanted to feel good about herself that day. Continuing, I told her that she looked alluring, but I had the impression she was more concerned with what others thought of her than she had ever been with me. In response, she apologized, saying she just wanted to feel attractive. I sighed and reminded her how attractive she had always been to me. I emphasized the depth of my love for her and believed she loved me as well. I approached her and gently removed the rings from her left hand. I went on to explain that the ring I gave her on her wedding day had special meaning for me because it symbolized our vow to forsake all others. I expressed my disappointment that it appeared to have less meaning for her. I mentioned that I did not want to see the ring I gave her on her finger while she was with another man. I also mentioned that the engagement ring was my mother's, and I planned to keep it for sentimental reasons. I slipped both rings into my pocket, and she looked surprised, but did not protest. I won't be present when he arrives, but I don't want him in my house. You can't be with him here. If you do, I will take serious action against him and ensure that you will never be desirable to a man again. I promise you will not be allowed to enter my home. Are you getting it? Yes, I will not let him in. That is good. I will be keeping an eye on things, I said. She asked, "Why are you behaving like this?" I responded, because the love of my life has shattered that love. I'm hoping this weekend is worth the consequences. Goodbye, Rose. And I turned and walked away from my soon-to-be ex-wife. She yelled at me as I left, but I was finished with her. I parked down the street so that Rose could see me if he entered the house. I'd risk imprisonment, but they'd suffer more. Soon his car arrived. You walked to the door and rang the doorbell. Rose opened the door and exited with her suitcase. She sent it down and hugged him, followed by a long, passionate kiss. As he picked up her suitcase, she looked at me with a smug grin. She sat beside him in the car and gave me another smug look as they drove past. I responded by flipping her off and wiping that smug expression off her face. When I returned home, I changed all of the locks in the garage door code. I'd already packed my suitcase, so I grabbed it and went to Casey. After checking in, I went to my room to set up my laptop. Rose made a move indicating they had already been intimate. As the camera focused on the foot of the bed, it was clear that he had not lasted long. He emerged from the bathroom completely naked. I couldn't help but laugh, given that he was holding a very small tool. Rose was accustomed to far more than what this guy could provide. At that point, Frank joined Rose on the bed, clearly ready for another round. She smiled at him and extended her arms. I couldn't help but laugh as she reached for his tiny tool. He didn't have to hold back because I doubted she could feel that small thing inside her. Wow, did she make a terrible decision? This guy was completely pitiful. I noticed a hint of frustration on her face as he took a break. It appeared that she was not going to be pleased with the outcome of the weekend. She would return home frustrated and be kicked out the next day. He was soon ready for another round, and he gave her another underwhelming 4-minute session. He stood it 3 times, and she stood it more than once. This was turning out better than I had hoped. I had to stop watching and go out for dinner and drinks. I left everything recorded so that I could gather all of the evidence I might need for the lawyer and make it abundantly clear to her what a poor decision she had made. When I returned, he was fast asleep and she seemed even more frustrated. This was actually quite enjoyable. When I got over the grief of losing my wife, I went to bed thinking about how much fun I'd have messing with him tomorrow. I thought about some of the attractive women I'd seen at the bar and realized I'd soon be free to pursue them. I fell asleep with a contented smile on my face. There was no more pain for me. My path was set, and I knew where I was going. I awoke feeling refreshed and ready to have some fun. After a shower, I went out for a nice breakfast and grabbed some snacks in case I couldn't leave. After returning to my room, I called the local florist. I ordered a bouquet for Rose, similar to the ones I used to give her on her anniversary. I wanted her to think about what she was putting at risk because there would be no more anniversaries. I requested that it be delivered at 11 a.m. My timing may have been good, but it didn't really matter. The timing proved to be perfect. They left the room for a while and then resumed their romantic activities. They were soon naked, and he had only begun when there was a knock on the door. The florist delivered the flowers, and Rose's face was contemplative before quickly turning angry. She picked up her cell phone and dialed a number. My cell phone began to ring, and I answered it, which led to a brief conversation. "Hello, and how are you?" "Not great. My wife is out with another guy while I'm here, and I'm getting angry or by the minute. Why do you care? I received a bouquet of flowers just like the ones you always give me on her anniversary. I was curious what you were up to. I'm not sure how you could think I did that. First and foremost, you and your brilliant boyfriend kept me in the dark about your plans. Second, if I had sent you flowers, they would have been ragweed, and the card would have addressed my cheating cut wife. Not very nice, is it? But then again, neither is your brief encounter with Frankie. Next, the flowers will give you an idea of what you're throwing away." I noticed a surprised expression on her face as I turned off my phone. She immediately tried calling again, but I didn't respond. She tried several more times before giving up. She told Frankie what I'd said, and he assured her that I'd get over it. However, that wouldn't happen until I got rid of her. She wasn't in the mood for closeness at first, but she gradually gave in, so I decided to order pizza delivery and chose Rose's favorite pizza. The pizza arrived just as he was getting back into the game. Frankie was upset and refused to pay, but the delivery person confirmed the room number and his phone number. He even threatened to contact the police. Frankie reluctantly paid up because they had paid for it. They decided to eat their lunch. After finishing their meal, they talked for a while, but Frankie's hormones got the best of him and he pursued her again. As things were heating up, I called the sandwich shop and requested her favorite sandwich for delivery. About a minute into their intimate time, the sandwich arrived. When Rose saw the sandwich, she assumed I had discovered their location. He could not believe it, but she spilled the beans about my sarcastic remark, claiming that I had most likely hacked into her new email and mentioned it there. It took her some time, but she finally realized what was going on. She said I was quite clever and would not have had much trouble doing so. They decided to get dressed and go out for a while, intending to return, freshen up, and prepare for their romantic date. She later assured him that she would make it up to him tonight. Before they left, I couldn't stop laughing. I was in tears. When they returned, they showered and dressed, with Rose putting on some lingerie and giving him a little show. He attempted to make a move, but she insisted on going out for a date. I was wondering how long it would take for my little surprise to kick in. She finished getting dressed and looked great. I hoped my plan would work because it would make for an interesting spectacle. They left, and I settled in, looking forward to their return. They returned about an hour later, and Rose dashed into the bathroom to take a shower. She stayed in there for a while, and when she came out, her breasts and crotch were bright red. They appeared to be in pain, and it seemed that little Frankie was also not getting any action at night. Rose was reclining on the bed when Frankie attempted to get frisky. She went off on him, saying she was in pain and wasn't interested right now. She chalked it up to an allergic reaction to her new lingerie. I spent some time organizing my videos and creating DVDs for both my lawyer and Frankie's wife. Once everything was ready, I called it a night. It had been an extremely successful day, and I couldn't help but smile. Trouble was brewing in paradise, and I was the source of it. Sunday morning, I got up and went home. Rose was in for a lot of trouble when she returned, but by tomorrow, everything would be over. Later that day, Frankie dropped her off without even walking her to the door. He just let her leave. I was sitting on the couch engrossed in a football game and didn't notice her arrival. She announced that she was home, and I barely responded. She walked right in front of the TV, flashing me a sultry smile, and said she thought I'd be glad to see her, given that she was not dead. I responded by asking what had given her that impression and whether she thought I had suddenly become foolish. She responded, stating that she did not think I was foolish, but rather that my love for her was strong enough to overcome the circumstances. I retorted by saying that while I had once loved her wholeheartedly, that I had changed after she left with someone else, despite my pleas. I expressed that I had poured my heart out to her only to have it mean nothing. I admitted that once she left with him, I no longer cared whether she would return. She appeared taken aback by my feelings and stated that she couldn't believe I felt that way about her. I responded firmly, confirming that this was the case and emphasizing that she had made a significant error. She then asked if there was any chance we could move forward, promising to do anything to make things right. I responded with a sarcastic remark, suggesting she'd get down on her knees and apologize. She protested, saying she couldn't do it. I sided with her and admitted that I knew she wouldn't, which only strengthened my doubts about the value of her promises to save our marriage, much like her pledge of fidelity when we got married. She told me she had been thinking about me all day and wanted to make love that evening. I responded coldly. You need me? I do not think so. Making love tonight? Not likely. Did you have little Frankie Ed protection whenever you were with him? She said no, he's married, but I can't have children. I continued, do you think you're the only one he's gotten rid of? Are you damaged goods now? As far as I'm concerned, I will not touch you until you have received a clean bill of health from a doctor. Also, I don't do seconds. I know he's clean, but if you're not sure, use some protection. She snapped back. Right. I'm going to use a rubber to sleep with my wife after she spent the weekend with some loser beer belly barker. Screw you. You chose little Frankie over me. I am going out for a while. I can't bear looking at your cheating ass tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom. I'm like you. I didn't do anything wrong. I responded firmly. We can discuss this tomorrow when you return from work. I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and went to a nearby bar and grilled to eat dinner and clear my mind. Well, my mind was already clear because I knew exactly what I was doing. I simply needed some distance from her. I don't drink much, so I had a meal and went for a long walk. When I got home, she was in my bed. I gave her a stern look and told her to leave my bed. She argued, claiming, "This is our bed. I have the same right to be here as you do." I replied, "The hell you do. You gave up on that when you became involved with little Frankie. So get out of my bed or I'll take your belongings and throw you out on the street." She began crying and slowly exited the room, and I made sure to close and lock the door behind her. Her tears were still audible as she walked down the corridor. The following morning, I completely ignored her. We both had breakfast, and she left at her usual time. As she turned to go, she said she loved me. I gave her a cold, scornful look and replied that I had loved her too, emphasizing that it was in the past tense. I saw the sorrow welling up in her eyes as she turned and walked away. Once she was gone, I started packing her belongings into garbage bags. Then I contacted Frankie's wife. I asked if she was aware that her husband had spent the weekend with my wife. She assumed he'd been away on business, so when I offered to provide her with copies of my evidence, she was very interested. I was surprised when she opened the door. She let absolutely stunning. I stammer and had to apologize to her, blaming my initial shock on her beauty, which was completely accurate. We got down to business and I explained what happened over the weekend. Rose was furious, so we agreed that she would accompany me to the lawyer's office to see if he would take her case. The attorney agreed to represent her and even offered us a discount. Rose began completing the necessary paperwork while I spoke with the attorney. I asked him if I needed to wait to serve Frankie to protect Rose, and he assured me that as long as she signed the papers first, she would be fine. Rose and I went out to lunch while they prepared her divorce papers. After she signed them, I dropped her off at home and returned to await Rose's call. I was supposed to call her that night to tell her how things went. My phone rang around 3 o'clock, and she sounded quite upset. She asked, "What the hell is this?" I was just served with divorce papers, and Frank received some papers about being sued for something. I responded, "Well, everything seems pretty straightforward to me. I warned you that there would be consequences to your weekend. You don't seem to have taken me seriously." She replied, "I didn't think you'd actually go through with this." I shot back, "Maybe you should have listened to me instead of believing everything little Frankie told you. Let us not discuss this over the phone. We can talk when you return to my place." Then I hung up. I put her belongings in garbage bags and tossed them into the front yard, knowing that I was filming the confrontation. It could be useful for obtaining a restraining order against her if necessary. When she pulled into the driveway and saw her belongings strewn about, she became enraged. She was screaming incoherently, and spit was flying from her mouth as she vented her rage. I remained calm as she vented, eventually breaking into our final conversation. "If you want to talk, you should sit down so that we can have a civil conversation. If not, I'll load your belongings into your car and you can leave," I said. She sobbed. "I never imagined you'd do this to me." I replied firmly, "Do this to you? You foolish woman, you did this to us. I warned you several times not to do it and even begged you not to destroy our marriage, but you chose to do exactly that. So why would you believe I wouldn't file for divorce?" "You said you loved me," she whimpered. "I admitted I loved you more than anything, but you broke my heart in return. The problem was that you did not love or respect me. I can't live with someone who thinks so little of me, even though I still care about you," I explained. She asked, "Why are you calling him Little Frankie?" "I had video cameras set up in your room to capture everything that happened over the weekend. You can understand why I call him Little. The first time I saw his underwhelming package, I couldn't help but cry with laughter. I even wondered if you could feel anything from that. I also noticed that you weren't having as much fun as you usually did when we were close," I said. "Sure," she responded. "We truly made love and I will probably miss it. I provided a different perspective. Consider it this way. You now have the freedom to be with him ever you choose. You can have a different partner every night," I suggested. She shook her head and stated, "I don't want that. I want you, only you." I suggested we go inside and take a seat for a few minutes. I apologize for my harsh words. I'm currently dealing with a lot of anger, but please understand that I would never physically harm someone. "The same cannot be said of little Frankie," I said. We went inside and sat down at the kitchen table as we had done many times before. It hit me hard when I realized that this would be our last time sitting together like this. She asked, "You wouldn't really hurt Frank, would you?" I replied firmly. "Why not? He destroyed our once happy marriage. I believe he should pay more than just for the lawsuit and divorce. He will not be getting divorced, by the way. His wife understood the situation and agreed to let him do it. He expressed out, 'Do you really believe it, or is it a ruse to make me appear bad so he can be with you?' I told her I spoke with his wife this morning and shared my evidence with her. He told her he was away on business. They now share a lawyer, and we even received a discount. I clarified." She reflected, "I wish you had been honest." I asked, "How would you react if I wanted to be with another man? You'd have gone crazy." I argued he knew his wife would never agree to it. "I doubt you believe me even now, and that is one of the reasons we are getting divorced. But truthfully, I don't care what you believe. When you call him later, you'll discover that he has also been shown the door." She asked, "So you're actually kicking me out?" I confirmed, "Yes, I am." The night you revealed your plan, I went into the guest room to reflect. Within an hour, I knew I wanted to get divorced. On Thursday, I purchased the equipment required to collect evidence and hack into your email account. Then on Friday, I went to the lawyer and started the divorce process. She asked, "Why didn't you tell me about your plans to divorce me?" I might have reconsidered. "Is there any chance you'd forgive me?" I replied, "Rose, I loved you so much that forgiveness could have been possible. However, you squandered your final opportunity last night. I think I could forgive you, but I'd never trust you again. I would spend every day wondering when you would want to be with someone else, and I can't live like this. It's best if we end it now." She couldn't hold back her tears. I said, "I'm like you. I've thought about this thoroughly, but every time I came to the same conclusion, I'm going to divorce you and make a little Frankie pay for destroying my marriage. You can call him before you leave if you want to share a place or something. Just don't try to use your credit card. I have canceled them all. I left half of our checking account balance for you, but I removed my name from it. I will split our savings with you. You can keep your card, but you will have to handle the payments. You can take all your clothes and personal items. Once you find a place to live, you can have as much furniture as you want. But the house is mine. If I decide to sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you. It's all laid out in the divorce papers. If you choose to contest it, I'll use all the evidence I have, and it won't end well for you. I don't want to go down that road, but I will if necessary." She replied, "I won't fight it. This is all my fault. I just wish I could undo it." I lightened the mood. "Well, do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb? Confused?" She asked. "No, what's the difference?" I equipped. "You can't have a romantic relationship with a light bulb." She didn't find it amusing at all. I informed her that it was time for her to leave, and I escorted her out of my house while she tearfully observed. I loaded all her belongings into her car. Once everything was packed, I opened her car door and handed her one last item, her wedding ring, which I had flattened with a hammer. I told her it was now just scrap gold that she could sell for a decent price. After closing her car door, I leaned in and kissed her on the forehead, uttering my final words to her, "Goodbye, my love." I then turned and walked back to my lonely house. I didn't even watch her drive away. I couldn't, as my eyes were filled with tears, and I cried for another hour until I was emotionally drained. Now it was time to consider my options. As I saw it, I had three choices. First, I could drown my sorrows in alcohol and drink myself into oblivion. However, I hardly drink and dislike the aftermath of heavy drinking, so that wasn't a viable option. Second, I could end my life and supposedly make everyone happy, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of achieving that. Third, I could stand tall, no one had done nothing wrong, and move forward with my life. The silver lining was the absence of Rose, which brought a smile to my face. I straightened up and, still smiling, dialed Rose's number. We made plans for dinner that evening, and I realized I was on the path to healing. As I stood upright and continued to smile, I called Rose's number once more. We arranged to meet for dinner that evening, and I sensed that I was on my way to recovery. Perhaps we'd end up as friends, or maybe I'd find someone new because the image of her still lingered in my mind. This story remarkably sheds light on the complex aspects of love, betrayal, and decision-making. It prompts us to reflect on how we react to life's trials and the paths we take to find healing. Story 2. Diving into the story of Ruth and Mark, you will meet a couple who faced incredible challenges but didn't give up. They overcame betrayals, fought for justice, and experienced the joy of becoming parents. It's a tale of love, courage, and faith in the future, showing that true strength lies in unity and mutual support. We all make mistakes of one kind or another, but the most important thing is what lessons we learn after them. My wife is on the way to making her biggest mistake in life, because of which she may lose not only me, but also herself. We had an average family, 2 children, and a stable income. But at some point, everything went wrong. My name is Mark Chase, and I want to start my story from when I was 18 years old and had just finished high school. From that time, I enrolled in college like many of my peers. I probably thought of myself as quite the cool guy, dating different girls, exploring how many of them I could charm. It was a kind of test for me. Would she be mine or not? Once I started college, like most guys my age, I soon realized that my thoughts were occupied not so much with studying as with the pursuit of seduction. Nevertheless, I studied enough in college to land a good job in sales. This job opened new opportunities for me, and I made sure not to miss out. I succeeded in sales, becoming one of the top sellers. I would go from house to house and apartment to apartment selling goods. But there were times when I took advantage of my position. It was a special feeling entering a home where typically a lonely woman would be dressed in something sexy or just in a robe. In those moments, I usually closed the deal quickly and then acted as what seemed natural for a young man and a lonely woman of any age. The hardest part was figuring out whether a woman was flirting with me or wanted something more. I didn't want to risk my job over a potential entanglement and subsequent dismissal. With so much going on around me, I preferred that women take the initiative. If they started talking about sex or made the first move, I was ready to reciprocate. Perhaps I missed many opportunities by acting on chance. Once, while doing some minor shopping in a mall, I encountered a delightful girl. She was petite, barely over 5 feet tall, with a contagious smile and an attractive figure. Serving me at the checkout, I decided to use my charm to persuade her to go on a date, and after the 10th visit to the store, she agreed. I truly fell in love with her and just hoped she shared my feelings. At that time, I was still working in sales and dating Ruth. We got along wonderfully, and soon our relationship moved to the next level. Yes, it was love unlike anything I had experienced before. I yearned to please not just myself, but her as well. 10 months into our acquaintance, Ruth got pregnant despite using contraception. We were that one couple in 100 who faced such a surprise, and we decided to get married in the 4th month of her pregnancy. Looking back, I realized I wasn't ready for marriage. I truly loved Ruth, that's true, but I was only 20 and quite immature. I acted thoughtlessly, and after the wedding, I found myself in bed with other women simply because I could. It was nothing like what I felt with Ruth. Despite everything, I still believed in our relationship. I didn't boast about my affairs, but I think people knew anyway that I was married and soon to be a father. I understand that some might have called me a scoundrel or worse, and I deserve those judgments. I see that now, but back then it seemed like just a desire to be with any woman. I was immature and not ready for the responsibilities that marriage and fatherhood bring. One day, Ruth discovered that I hadn't been faithful to our marriage, after which she couldn't stop her tears. We spent long hours discussing what had happened, and she seriously considered divorce, which might have been the best solution for her. Nevertheless, she found the strength to forgive me. I sincerely regretted my actions. The consequences of my infidelity were a real revelation to me. In my youth, I rarely thought about the consequences of my actions, but that changed when I saw the pain I had caused my wife. This realization literally tore me apart, and I promised never to betray her trust again. Since then, I've tried to be a better husband, and soon we had a son whom we named Jacob. We faced many difficulties, as any other family would. We had financial troubles and often argued over trivial matters, but we learned to resolve our disagreements and kept our love alive. After that incident, my love for Ruth only grew stronger, although I couldn't always show it. But she knew I was willing to do anything for her. Our closeness was truly special. A few years later, our second son David was born, and our happiness seemed boundless. We were a real family, albeit with ordinary problems and desires. I always dreamed of owning my own business to independently decide my fate. After many conversations with Ruth, and despite financial difficulties, we acquired a small construction store. The business didn't make much money, but it provided enough for us to live on, and I was happy to realize my dream. Ruth struggled with her weight after the birth of our second child and often criticized herself, but I always assured her of her beauty. For me, her appearance was unimportant. I loved her for who she was. Despite my support, she rarely believed me. We often argued over her diets and attempts to lose weight. Each time these arguments ended with reminders of my past mistake, even though it was long ago and Ruth said she had forgiven me. Apparently, some wounds take a very long time to heal. My wife has always been busy raising our sons and worked part-time to be able to give them more attention. When they entered middle school, her career took off. She was offered a promotion and became the head of her department, significantly increasing her income. Then she decided to focus on herself again, started to follow a diet, and joined a women's fitness club. Although it didn't worry me, after all, it was a place exclusively for women, I couldn't help but wonder if such a decision could lead to infidelity. However, her determination and the results she began to show were comforting. She was losing weight and felt noticeably better, which, without a doubt, pleased me. Our marital life, like many, had its ups and downs, especially when it came to sex. After many years of marriage, it seemed that passion had become something mundane for us, and sometimes we could go months without making love. However, when it did happen, the moments were truly magical. Her job and new figure brought her joy, and I saw how much happier she had become. One day, she came home and asked if I would mind if she spent some time with friends. Of course, I had nothing against it, as I hadn't seen them in many years. She mentioned that they had planned a bachelorette party for Saturday and wanted to make sure I was okay with it. It seemed strange to me, and I felt something was bothering her. When I asked about the problem, she answered that she might be experiencing menopause symptoms affecting her mood. I hugged her, assuring her of my love and support. From the day she was preparing for the party with friends, I couldn't help but notice how she froze in my arms. I realized we had problems, but solving them would have to wait for now. I decided to give her space and time. She looked beautiful in her outfit, as always, and I never tired of telling her so. Before leaving, she informed me where she was going and that her friend Pan would pick her up. Left alone, I realized I needed to learn more about what was happening with her and how we could overcome our problems together. I never wanted to spy on her. My trust in her was boundless. But observing her behavior, I couldn't help but notice that something had changed. It was important for me to understand the reasons for these changes, especially when Ruth and her friends started visiting a huge dance club where it's easy to get lost in the crowd. Going there, I chose a spot on the second-floor balcony, which offered a view of the entire hall. From there, I could see how Ruth and her friends, settling into cozy, semi-circular booths, were having a good time. Maybe I was wrong in my suspicions. Ordering a drink, I simply observed her, regretting my presence here, but I needed to be sure of her well-being. Ruth's friends were diverse. Among them were both married and single women, as well as divorced ones. Most of them I had met once or twice, but there were also those whom I was seeing for the first time, presumably acquaintances from the gym. About half an hour later, a few men approached their table, offering the ladies to dance. Ruth initially refused, but after a couple of cocktails, she agreed. I didn't see anything alarming in this, however. I was concerned about a potential problem she might encounter. As time went on, she increasingly stayed on the dance floor among men I didn't know, possibly work colleagues or just strangers wanting to have a good time. I decided to stay a bit longer to see what would happen next. I watched as she began to slowly dance with one guy who embraced her and allowed his hands to slide onto her buttocks, pulling her closer to himself. She reacted by pushing his hands away, but he persisted and tried again. Eventually, when he grabbed her once more, she left his hand in place for a short while before pushing him away again. Then his hand moved to her chest, where it lingered for a few seconds before she pushed him away again. This greatly concerned me, and I wondered whether I should intervene or say something. I was sure she was unaware of my presence and pondered whether such behavior was normal for her or if she simply didn't want to cause a scene. At the end of the song, she returned to her friends, and I was too far away to make out their conversation, though some of the girls seemed cheerful or were smiling. Minutes later, they finished their drinks and began to gather to leave. The guy she danced with approached her to say goodbye and kissed her lightly. This made me wonder if I had seen more in their interaction than there actually was. I quickly got up and, passing through the back door, headed to my car to go home. At home, the boys were already watching TV. I nodded to them in greeting and went to prepare something to drink, feeling the smell of alcohol, which seemed to me of fitting into the evening. 10 minutes after my arrival home, Ruth also arrived. I greeted her and asked how her evening was. She replied that it was fine, though she seemed a bit tense. Looking into her eyes, I said, "Ruth, we need to talk." I knew that Ruth never lied to me. She might have her secrets like all of us, but I had never caught her in an outright lie. I noticed tears hiding in the corners of her eyes. She looked at me, barely holding back her emotions, and said, "Mark, I have a problem, and I don't know how to solve it." Her voice trembled and she started to cry. I gently hugged her, trying to comfort her, and asked if it had anything to do with her bachelorette party. She ambiguously replied, "Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Let's sit down. We need to talk." My heart tightened with a premonition of trouble. "Ruth, tell me what happened tonight. Why are you so upset?" I insisted, wanting to understand the cause of her sorrow. She began her story about how she and her friends went to a club where they started drinking and dancing. One guy started touching me insistently, and I didn't stop him right away, she admitted with difficulty. My bafflement turned into shock when Ruth confessed that she liked the attention from men, and that this feeling had been tormenting her for several months. She was seeking support in me, but I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Ruth, Is this infidelity? Were you with someone else? I asked, feeling my heart tear apart. Through tears, she replied that she had never physically cheated on me but confessed that she had allowed men to touch her. This revelation shattered my perception of our marriage. Ruth pleaded with me not to leave, saying she loved me, but I realized we both needed time to sort out our feelings and desires. I suggested we should live apart for a while. She would stay at home with our sons, and I would move into an apartment above my shop. These 2 months were to be a trial for both of us, a time when Ruth needed to decide what she truly wanted from life and our relationship. I made it clear that if she chose the path of freedom and new relationships, I would immediately file for divorce. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I understood that love and trust were essential for our relationship to survive. I began my conversation with our sons the next morning, inviting them to the living room. It seemed they had caught snippets of last night's conversation from their rooms, and as they sat down, I opened my heart to them. I explained that their mom and I were facing some family difficulties, which meant I would have to live above the shop for a while until we resolved our issues. I emphasized that none of this was their fault and that it was a matter between their mom and me. Ruth, standing behind them, couldn't hold back her tears but chose to remain silent. I assured them that we both loved them very much and that they could turn to us at any time. I promised to attend their school events and assured them that nothing would change for them except my absence from home. I assured them that no matter what happens in the future, they would always have a roof over their heads and should not worry about moving or losing friends. They wanted to know more, but I explained that this was all I could share for now. I confessed that their mother and I were facing serious issues that needed to be resolved, and we would see how things would unfold over the next 2 months. After they helped me move my personal belongings into the apartment above the store, I asked them to support their mother in any way they could, as she needed their love if we were to keep the family together. I advised them not to ask her too many questions about the separation and to help around the house. I knew they were good boys and would do their best. I was only a mile away from them, ready to help if needed. Ruth needed time to sort through the situation. I was full of doubts myself, afraid of losing her. My life felt like hell. Now it all depended on Ruth. I had to overcome serious problems. I had a wife whom I trusted more than anyone in the world, knowing she had never betrayed me and always supported our marriage by telling me the truth. But her latest revelation could be the end of our marriage. I loved her more than anything and did not want to lose her. I was not weak and was ready to fight for her, but I did not know where to start. This decision became the most important in her life, to choose the affair or save our marriage. But if she loves me, she wouldn't need to choose. Having moved into my new apartment above the store, I felt acute pain and loneliness. Thoughts of Ruth tormented me. Trying to give her space and time to think, I drowned myself in work, spending every free minute in the store to distract myself. The business was picking up, and I found myself overwhelmed with paperwork, which I hated. Even though sales were enjoyable, realizing I couldn't manage on my own, I decided to hire an office worker and placed an ad in the newspaper. My sons supported me, helping in the store every couple of days. Their visits were not just assistance with the business, but also a bridge to the past. They told me how their mother was coping with my absence, that she cried a lot and felt depressed. Learning that Ruth had made a doctor's appointment, I realized how deep her pain was. One day, Pam, a longtime friend of Ruth and an acquaintance of mine, walked into the office. She was closer to Ruth than anyone and candidly expressed her thoughts on my actions. Her words were harsh. She called me a fool for leaving Ruth at such a difficult time instead of supporting and protecting her. According to Pam, Ruth needed me more than ever, and I betrayed her by leaving her alone with her problems. This conversation made me reconsider my actions. I began to see the situation from a different angle, realizing that perhaps I had rushed into the decision to give Ruth time and space instead of being there and helping her through the difficulties. Deep down, I began to understand that love and support might have been the best medicine for her. I've always considered myself a person who acts rightly, but a recent conversation with Pam made me doubt my beliefs. "I will always be there for you," I promised Ruth before leaving. However, the realization came too late. Pam was right. I acted foolishly. Addressing Pam, I confessed my confusion. What should I do? I'm lost. How can I help her? My love for Ruth was very strong, and Pam, her best friend, knew it better than anyone. "Didn't you see the warning signs in advance?" she asked me. We both knew that Ruth was struggling, as she had been sharing her concerns with me for several months. Perhaps changes in her life or emotional fluctuations triggered by a new social circle at the gym made her see the world differently. Once Ruth started going to the gym and lost weight, she began to attract the attention of other men, which undoubtedly affected her self-esteem. Before leaving, Pam reminded me of an important meeting. "You need to be at the formal on Friday at 9 p.m. Shocked, I couldn't understand what Pam meant. "What's happening?" I asked. She explained that there would be a business meeting on Friday at 7 p.m., which all mental managers, including my wife's company, are expected to attend. This event includes dinner and cocktails, and spouses are invited. Pam also shared alarming news. Some managers plan to get Ruth drunk and seduce her, and I won't be allowed in as I would be unable to control the situation. She emphasized that no one would be there to protect Ruth at this fancy event. "Why does Ruth know about this?" I asked. "Yes, but she has to be there as she's part of the management," Pam replied, adding that she would keep an eye on Ruth to ensure she doesn't get into trouble. I thanked Pam for her friendship and care for Ruth, but deep down, I knew at 9 p.m. on Friday, Ruth's foolish husband, who in my opinion she doesn't deserve, will protect her. That husband is me. Background on behalf of Mark's wife. I met Mark in my youth while working at a store in a shopping mall. I first saw him when he walked in and began persuading me to go on a date with him. His persistence day after day amused me until I decided to agree. His surprised look after my many refusals turned into a question. "Are you serious? Do you really want to go on a date with me?" His smile was so genuine that I couldn't refuse. As we started dating, our interaction became more intimate and I allowed him to touch me. My feelings for Mark developed into deep love, though I tried not to show it too overtly. Over time, our relationship grew closer and I decided to take care of contraception. However, despite taking precautions, I discovered I was pregnant. This news shocked me, and when I shared it with Mark, he disputed his initial surprise and proposed to me, answering that he would always be there for me and the child. Over the years, our life together was filled with various events. I achieved success at work, gained more independence, and even managed to lose a significant amount of weight, which did not go unnoticed by the opposite sex. However, my heart was fully devoted to Mark, and despite other women in the gym discussing their romantic adventures, I valued our deep connection and shared moments. My friend Pam proved to be a great support in difficult times, even when Mark could not understand my feelings. She suggested seeking professional help, but I hesitated, considering our family values. Some also warned me about the potential consequences of my behavior, reminding me of the importance of preserving our vows and sincere feelings for each other. I shared with Pam that I heard from the girls at the gym that they intentionally underestimated their abilities, aiming to attract more attention. Looking at me, Pam asked, "Ruth, do you really need to attract the attention of unfamiliar men?" I realized she was right. Yet the feeling of being the center of attention was pleasant. I allowed some men to touch me over my clothes, seeking to attract even more attention. A couple of months later, I promised myself that this life filled with unwanted attention and whispers from men about their desires began to tire me. I rejected them, asserting that I would never betray my husband despite his infidelity. One day, I made the mistake of confessing to a colleague that I did not intend to respond to infidelity with infidelity. Often, I wondered what it would be like to be with someone else. Mark was my only love, and I couldn't compare him to anyone else. But he always cared about my feelings, being both tender and passionate. Over time, I began to experience mood swings and felt that Mark wasn't paying enough attention to me. My thoughts were often filled with wild fantasies, which scared me. I felt like I was losing my mind, unable to cope with these fantasies. Eventually, I confessed to Mark that I needed his care and warmth, which he had always provided. However, in response, he gave me an ultimatum. If I started an affair, he would file for divorce. After that, he announced he was moving, giving me 2 months to make a decision. I was devastated and didn't know where to turn. If it weren't for Pam's support in the first weeks after Mark left, I wouldn't have known what to do next. Pam had lived through her nightmare when she caught her husband with another woman. Shocked by the betrayal, she was ready for drastic measures, but they ended up divorcing. Since then, she has started dating again but has been extremely cautious. She is now seeing Ree, whose wife left him for another man 3 years ago. They seem happy together, and I sincerely hope it works out for them. Pam deserves true happiness. She is an exceptional person and a faithful friend. This week, I scheduled a consultation with a doctor, aiming to keep a clear mind for our meeting on Wednesday, despite having plans for Friday. The doctor, a woman with a warm look, suggested we start our conversation with a brief discussion. I shared my experiences with her, the incessant crying, the tumultuous emotions I couldn't control. Then we moved on to more complex topics, including my husband's ultimatum regarding our sexual life and even a potential affair. She smiled and noted that I should have come to her much sooner. In her opinion, many problems could have been avoided. My doctor canceled my previous appointments and prescribed a hormonal relaxant to stabilize my emotional spikes caused by weight changes. She assured me that many medications would no longer be necessary as they only exacerbated the internal conflict in my body. According to her, my body had just begun the maturation process, which would last many more years. She looked at me seriously, touching on the topic of my husband, and expressed regret that he does not support me as he should. She noted that she had seen many couples part ways due to misunderstandings and lack of support. From her perspective, many men pursue only superficial goals, forgetting about the depth and significance of relationships. She suggested I talk to my husband again, convinced that an honest conversation could bring us closer. At the end of our meeting, the doctor insisted that I contact her if any problems arise. Otherwise, she expects to see me in 2 months. Leaving, I couldn't hold back my tears, but she hugged me, assuring that everything would work out. Her words gave me hope that after getting through Friday, I could meet with Mark on Saturday and discuss everything that's happening, how much I missed him. That oddball continuation of the story, on behalf of Mark during that period of my life when Pam had laid it all out for me, I realized how greatly I had been mistaken about Ruth. I needed to talk to her, but when I tried to call, I was told she was at the doctor's. This was just the beginning of my efforts to get in touch with her. On Thursday, I finally managed to reach her at work. Ruth was happy to hear from me and suggested we meet on Saturday. I proposed Friday, but she explained she couldn't because of an important meeting that would last until late in the evening. With sadness in my voice, I confessed my love, to which she reciprocated and asked me to come on Saturday. Her voice trembled as she asked this of me, and I promised to be there without any doubt. Thursday turned out to be a tough day for me. Nightmares kept me from sleeping. In my dream, I saw myself entering a restaurant where Ruth was sitting between 2 men, slightly intoxicated, her dress displaced, revealing part of her body. Waking up on Friday, I found the store bustling, but my thoughts were with Ruth. I tried to contact her to no avail. Her boss only informed me of her absence. Then I asked my coworker, Milton, to close the store for me on Saturday so I could meet with Ruth. He agreed, noting he could manage without my help. On Saturday, I went to the office center only to learn Ruth wouldn't be back until Monday due to important meetings. The secretary offered to leave a message, but I decided it was better to call myself on Monday, not wanting to arouse any suspicion. Pam, whom I met at the office center, told me Ruth was excited about our upcoming meeting. According to Pam, Ruth looked stunning, dressed in an elegant black mini dress, and at her boss's, Edward and Ryan were planning to offer her an intimate evening, while other colleagues didn't want to interfere out of respect for Ruth as an individual. Pam warned me that the rumors about Edward and Ryan's plans could be true or false, but given their influence, few would dare to oppose them. I expressed my gratitude to Pam, highlighting her sincere friendship and support, and urged her to do the right thing. Pam confidently stated that my friend and I were like 2 halves of a whole, expressing help that no one could separate us as we were both true friends to her. She added that her boyfriend Ree was also very special to her. Returning home, I decided to tidy up a bit and prepare for the evening at a trendy restaurant. I chose Docker pants and a sports jacket for the occasion, deciding against wearing a tie. As a hardware store owner, I always tried to look presentable, but without excess. In the evening, I called my sons to discuss work matters, and they assured me of their readiness to help, especially Milton when needed. It was already 8:30 p.m., and I went to the store where Milton was arranging products on the shelves. I was proud of how well they worked, even being my sons, and dreamed that one day the store would pass into their hands, continuing the family business. Approaching Milton, I asked him for a pack of coins, and although his look was somewhat surprised, he handed them to me. After that, I headed to the restaurant where, to my surprise, I found Pam and Ree dining together. Pam smiled and noted that although we were not in a private room, we were close enough to each other. She mentioned that many colleagues had already left and asked about Ruth, Ed, and Ryan. I saw my wife sitting with 2 pigs. I went outside and threw a stone at one of the cars, and one of them received a notification about the car alarm going off in Ryan's car, who then went out to check his Mercedes. At that time, Ruth, deciding it was time to make Ed pay for his actions, splashed a drink in his face. Suddenly, I burst into the room holding a roll of coins and struck Ed, breaking his nose with the first blow. The coins scattered in different directions, and Ed fell to the floor. When Ryan returned, he began to threaten me with a lawsuit in the seizure of my shop, but Ruth offered a better solution. Producing a dictaphone, she played a recording that could change the outcome of the situation. On Monday, I planned to file a complaint for sexual harassment. Addressing Ryan and Ed, who were still on the floor, Ruth said, "The only reason I tolerated your advances tonight was to capture them on video. Hopefully, this will help prevent your harassment of other women. See you in court." After these words, she struck Ryan in the groin, causing him to scream and fall next to Ed. I took Ruth by the hand and we headed for the exit. At the door, spectators greeted us, who began to applaud us. A young dishwasher winked and patted me on the back. We left together holding hands. Outside the restaurant, Pam and Ree were waiting for us, smiling. Pam hugged Ruth and Ree exchanged thanks with me. Noticing the sudden noise in the triggered car alarm, we decided to stay for a moment. After Pam and Ree left, Ruth and I headed to my car. Suddenly, I realized I hadn't said a word all evening. Stopping, I looked at Ruth and said, "You look magnificent. I am the happiest man on earth to have you. Forgive me for everything." Tears sprang from her eyes as she hugged me tightly. At home, we immediately headed to the bedroom. Removing her dress, Ruth asked me, "What were you thinking? Why did you dress up so much for them?" I wondered. She replied that she dressed up for me to show that I have something they will never have. "I love you so much," I confessed, and we hugged, laying down in bed. The following morning, upon waking up and not finding our sons who had already gone to work, I noticed a note on the refrigerator. "Welcome home, Dad. We missed you," signed by Jacob and David. Ruth added her own note, "Me too." The rest of the weekend was wonderful. Our sons helped us with the car and brought thanks from the dishwasher who had been watching over the vehicle. "You have wonderful parents," he told our sons before giving them a high five. Ruth and I laughed, proud of our tradition of defending each other and those we love. At dawn on Monday, I went to work. Although parting with Ruth seemed unbearable, we had just begun to build new relations, and I already had to leave to catch up on missed work. At the same time, Ruth went to our lawyer to discuss evidence proving Ed and Lyon's inappropriate behavior that evening. The lawyer confirmed that it was a typical case of sexual harassment, and since then, Ruth took leave, deciding to wait for the end of the proceedings. While Milton and I were selecting candidates for the accountant position, none of the applicants won our approval. However, Milton, returning to the office one day, announced that he had found the perfect candidate. To my astonishment, he had already offered her the job without my knowledge. I was shocked by his audacity, but when Ruth appeared at the door, asserting she had all the necessary skills and could bring additional benefits, I couldn't hide my delight. A month after Ruth went back to the doctor, she received joyful news. The doctor supported her, noting significant improvement in her condition after she managed to control her hormones and relieve stress from her previous job. However, Ruth faced a new challenge. She was pregnant. Tears of joy and fear mixed when she asked me if I loved her. My support was unconditional, and together we rejoiced at the upcoming addition. 9 months of trials passed, and we became parents to a wonderful girl, Pamela, who was the embodiment of her mother's beauty. Ruth is now not just an accountant. She has become a key figure in our home and business. We found happiness and confidence in the future, especially after the harassment case was settled in our favor, securing our children's future. All difficulties were left behind, and only joy and love awaited us ahead. This story of Ruth and Mark is a beautiful reminder that love and the strength of family can help overcome the toughest challenges. They demonstrate that even in difficult situations, belief in each other and readiness to support are crucial.